Back again. Happy Friday. Okay, so today we are going to do the same thing we did last Friday. We're going to read those in between sections of the chapters that we read this week. So this week we read chapters 4, 5, and 6. So the in between sections for those are called The Americans, the British, and the World. So this should be pretty interesting. Go ahead and pull up your Google Doc where you answered the questions, hopefully already answered the questions on the virtual field trip. Hope you enjoyed that. And we will get started. So the first questions are on the section about the Americans. So those questions say, what were the 3 parts of the American Army? And number 2 says, what were the Special Rangers? So I'm going to go ahead and read the section on Americans, and then we will continue to the other 2. All right, the Americans. The American Army consisted of 3 parts. See, already got a question answer right off the bat. The Continental or Regular Army, the Volunteer Militia, and the Rangers, or small groups that were trained in guerrilla tactics. The volunteer militia included the elite Minutemen. The Continentals, so this first part is about the Continentals. The Continentals bore the brunt of the fighting, and they were equipped much like the British, with smooth-bore brown bess muskets and some bayonets. Some of them also carried tomahawks or small hand axes, which would be very effective once past the first line, the line of bayonets. The militia volunteers were usually used to supplement the Continentals, but were quite often not as dependable or steady as they could have been had they been trained better, and they often evaporated after receiving the first volley and before the bayonets came. Most of them were also issued smooth-bore muskets, and some of them had bayonets for them. But others had rifles, which were very effective at long range, but could not mount bayonets. Special ranger groups, such as Morgan's rifles, had an effect far past their numbers because of the rifles they carried. A rifle, by definition, has a series of spiral grooves down the inside of the barrel. With the low pressure of black powder, the rifling was then with a slow twist, grooved with a turn of about 1 rotation for 35 or 40 inches. A patched ball was gripped tightly in the bore, and the grooved rifling and the long bore up to 40 inches enabled a large powder charge, which allowed the ball to achieve a much higher velocity, more than twice of that of a smooth bore's. And the high rate of rotation or spin stabilized the ball flight, resulting in greater accuracy. So, that's all of the information for the Americans. So, to repeat that part about Special Rangers, it says, Special Ranger groups such as Morgan's rifles had an effect far past their numbers because of the rifles they carried. So, hopefully that should help you answer that question. If it were me, I would pause right here, go answer those questions, and then come back when you get done and unpause so we can read about the British. Okay, hopefully you have just finished answering the questions about the Americans and you are back to hear about the section on the British. If not, then go ahead and go back and answer those questions because it's going to be really confusing if you try to answer them at the very end because I'm going to have given you a whole lot of information to remember and that's too much. So if you haven't already, stop here, go answer the questions about the Americans. If you need to rewind, do so. If not, good luck. Okay, the section on the British. So the question that you have to answer about the British, it says, what did they tell the officers when they were being shipped out? What did they tell the officers when they were being shipped out? Okay, the British. Generally poor trained, the British enlisted soldier was also poorly paid, often going months with no pay at all. Poorly cared for, the wounded were virtually ignored and allowed to die alone unless a friend had time to help. Poorly fed, salt beef and dried peas and tea were mainstays, and poorly treated. tied to a wagon wheel and flogged until its back was shredded for the slightest infraction. And yet, somehow, amazingly, up until the War for Independence, he managed to conquer most of the world. Young British officers in England, when they were being shipped out to fight in the colonies, were told to settle your affairs and make out a proper will, because your riflemen will almost certainly kill you. And that's it for the British. So that wasn't too bad at all. So go ahead and pause this video, go answer that question, and I will see you back here in a minute so we can read about the world. Okay, hopefully we haven't just been sitting here for an awkward amount of silence and you have already gone and answered those questions about the Americans and the British, and you are on the last one for this Friday, and it's about the world. So this one looks like a long question, but it's a very short section, as you can see here. That is the section. That's it. So it's a very short section. The question says, what side did the following groups fight on? And then it lists the Native Americans, Spain, Germany, and France. So that's what we're going to be reading about. It says, what side did the following groups fight on? And I'll read this pretty slowly and carefully so that you can fill it out as we go. If you need to listen to this part twice, that's what I would recommend doing. So, the world. The War for Independence very rapidly turned into something like a world war. Native Americans fought on both sides, and Spain got involved on the American side, or at least its navy did. Germany sent the mercenaries known as Hessians. The French were a small, staunch ally of the United States. So the French were on the side of the United States, with their navy keeping England from resupplying her troops and distracting it from the American navy. The English navy, in fact, was so preoccupied with the French that it could not focus on the American problem. So that's actually the end. So let's go through here one more time. Native Americans fought on both sides. Spain got involved on the American side. Germany sent the mercenaries known as the Hessians, so you can just put that for Germany, that they sent their mercenaries, and the French were an ally of the United States, so they fought with the United States. So it says which side did they fight on? France fought with the United States. So hopefully that made your life a little bit easier there towards the end. Happy Friday, and I will see y'all next week on Monday for Chapter 7.